The Shine on CX Show with Claire Boscq, illuminating the path to exceptional customer service.
Hello there and welcome to the Shine on CX Show. And today you can't see the smile on the radio, but I tell you what, this smile and the jumper is shining at us this morning.
I put the shiniest jumper that I own on just for you.
Thank you. My guest today is Jo Ferbrache. Hello, Jo. How are you?
Hello, my lovely. I'm very well. All the better for seeing you, obviously.
Obviously. The light is shining all over the studio today.
I love it.
You and I have known each other for quite a while in different ways and different industry, right? I think you started your part of your industry was in hospitality, which is where we met really the first time.
It was at the brewery.
Yes,
back in the day. That feels like another lifetime ago now.
Yes.
Especially because of what I do now as well. But yeah, I've been in sales, marketing, obviously managing a marketing agency as well. And I think the journey that I've been on has taken me into a completely different place.
And I think sometimes you need that moment as well, just to think, what am I doing? Where am I going? And I think that's what transformed you and your new business now and what you do completely.
Absolutely. I just hit that point where I went, enough is enough. Something has to change.
Yeah.
You know, I was a grey area drinker. So that was my thing that I was using to cope because the jobs that I was in, they were stressful jobs. And I think a lot of people resonate with the fact that we all have things that we use. And for me, that was one of the things. I mean, there's other things too, but that was the most destructive. And I was a grey area drinker. So people were encouraging me to drink. Nobody was going, don't do it. You know, when I worked at the brewery, that was part of my job.
Right, yes, absolutely. That's, you have to drink.
I was pushing it on people. I was talking about the health benefits,
Yeah.
I was talking about beautiful beer and females and, creating glassware for women to drink out of, you know. And I think that when that's become part of your culture and part of your identity, then it's very hard to be able to shift that. But in my role, when I was the managing director, I just had this moment where I just went, is this serving me? And I think for a long time, I knew that it hadn't been. And, it wasn't so fun anymore. And I just said, what do I need to do? I think I had one too many kind of client parties where I actually couldn't remember actually the end of the party. And while I'm sure I was very entertaining and very fun for everybody around me, life and soul and all that, it wasn't so fun picking up the pieces afterwards. And I just got to that point where I said, I need to make that change. And I did a charity challenge. And that's a whole other story. Right.
But that charity challenge transformed you and actually your beliefs and what you do now as a coach, because that's
absolutely. So throughout that time, I had so many people who were curious about how I'd made that change because I was very vocal. I shared it. That was my way. I used it for an accountability. Yeah. Raising money for charity, obviously doing good, not going to let them down, but also sharing my story, which meant that people came on the journey with me. And then I had other people getting in touch with me saying, I really resonate with what you're saying. How did you go about it? And what I realised at the end of the year was that I really loved helping people. And that's when I decided, actually, I want to train to become a coach. It was the best thing that I've ever done. I learned so much about myself. I felt like it was the next piece of the puzzle for me after going on that journey and stripping everything back and really starting to connect with the real me. Rather than the one behind the mask, the one behind the booze kind of thing. And then starting to really do that work for yourself, because you have to do that work for yourself before you start helping and supporting others. That was, the most incredible journey. And then being able to help others to let go of what no longer serves them and to be able to learn tools and techniques to be able to regulate their nervous system has been amazing. And what I noticed was that when I first started coaching people, I was focused on mindset because that was the kind of coaching that I'd been taught. But there were some people, and they'd take a few steps forwards and then they'd end up going backwards. And I noticed that was when it felt like there was a lot that person was carrying, and that's held in the body. And so if you just work with mindset alone, it can only get you so far, because then the body, if it's not aligned, is going to drag you back. So I started to become really curious around mind and body work. And so that led me to discover, first of all, EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, which involves tapping on meridian points. It blows my mind how this thing works. It is absolutely incredible, especially if you get to work with somebody one-to-one, because you can really go deep and help somebody to remove those blocks. And I know we're going to talk a bit about that at some point during our chat today. But so I started off with doing EFT, then moved into, right, I need to understand trauma, because what I recognized was that sometimes people were really bringing up stuff that they needed to be held and supported properly through. And actually my training in the past wasn't trauma informed. You know, you can become a coach and not have that trauma informed lens. And so I started to look for trauma informed training, which led me to something called the SAR method, which is somatic activated healing. And my goodness, that was the most incredible, intense training that I've ever done. And it's about actually letting go of the story. Because a lot of people don't want to go back to the story. They want to just deal with the emotion and what's happening in the body. And so there are lots of different movements, breathwork, kind of patterns that you can use, meditation, affirmation. Using that mix really helps people to release. And then the next part that got me kind of to where I am now is I wanted to really understand what was going on in the body. Because some people might think some of this stuff is a bit woo-woo.
Oh, yes.
If they don't get it, they're like, that sounds a bit woo. What are you talking about? And so I thought, right, I need to take people on the journey from the, wow, that's what's going on in my body. I understand that.
Yes.
That's the science, to the kind of woo stuff, which actually isn't that woo once you start looking at the science.
Yeah, because it makes sense.
Because it all makes sense. But to get somebody out of their comfort zone and to bring them to that point, there's normally a bit of a journey to get them to that place. So physical intelligence is all about being able to connect with the body and to be able to recognize our state that we're in.
The triggers.
All of that stuff. And to be able to shift our state to one that supports us rather than sabotages us. And that work has helped me personally so much, because I actually had a fear of public speaking.
Right.
Okay. So about 14 years ago, it was back when I was at the brewery. So before that, pre that, I was a bit of a performer. I loved it.
Yeah, yes.
I'd put on the plays when I was, a child, for the whole family at Christmas, with all of the little posters that I'd designed, inviting them to my one-person nativity show. And then at this point in my career, I think I was at that point where I thought, I'm really good at this. You know, the ego was definitely running the show a little bit. And, you know, I'm not ashamed to say that. I think everybody has those points in their life. And I went to an event that my boss was meant to go to. And basically he was like, I'm really sorry, I can't go. Can you go instead? And I turned up, and this is obviously me like 14 years ago. So I was completely unregulated, like dysregulated. I was like Tigger on a trampoline, bouncing into this place, dressed in my colourful dress. And it was just filled with old guys, okay? And we were all put on tables and we were all asked to debate something. And I did not agree with what my table were talking about. And they pushed me up onto the stage to share the opinion of the table.
Oh, wow.
It was horrific. Wow. And the pressure of that, and my whole body, and this is the thing. So back then my body went, no, you can't share that because you don't agree with it. And I was up on that stage, and I had, for the first time, I would say, that proper out-of-body experience where I left my body. It's a blackout. That's the only thing that I can describe it as. If anybody's ever experienced a blackout in some shape or form, where you're still talking, but you have nobody in the body knowing what's happening. There's no control of what's coming out.
Yeah. Your fear and your fear, fight and flight
That
mode
kicked
was
in.
totally kicked in.
Alarm bells.
Everything was out of control.
I was being chased by a saber-toothed tiger in that
absolutely.
moment, basically. And I just froze. And I had the full body reaction. I had the heart beating so loud that you can't like concentrate on anything else. The clammy hands, the turning stomach, the kind of like dry mouth, which is trying to stop you from saying anything, trying to close you down so that you don't share this thing that you don't believe in. And from that moment onwards, that was held in my body.
Triggers. Yeah.
That was a trigger.
A total anchor, right?
It was horrendous.
Yes.
From that moment onwards, I remember leaving that event and I was crying all the way home. I thought my life had ended. Very dramatic. But, you know, you have those moments, don't you, where that is what it feels like.
Absolutely.
And every time I was put in a position where I had to speak publicly, that full body reaction kicked in. I'd get the rash go up my neck. That was the first sign kind of thing, like bright red. I'd get the clammy hands, like sliding around kind of thing. And I would just feel like my body was sabotaging me and it was trying to stop me from being able to move forwards. And through working with these different tools and techniques, I have been able to shift that, but also to recognize that you're going to get nervous when you're doing something that's important because you care. That's a good thing. That can really drive you in a good way. So that's normal. But what I was experiencing wasn't normal. That was like so heightened that it would make me say no. I'm involved with an initiative called Leadership Jersey. And for years, I said no to presenting.
You were behind organising it, but never on stage doing it.
I'm busy. I've got to do the social media. I've got to talk to the speaker. I've got to do all these things. I was busy being busy. And then we got to the point where we got some additional help in. And then it was like, are you ready to start doing what you should have been doing years ago? Oh, gosh. I can't hide behind anything anymore. What am I going to do? And this is the thing. It makes me sad that there's been so many opportunities where I've shied away from really going, do you know what? This is something that I'm involved in and I'm really proud of it, you know?
Being the best of yourself, I think, you know, that's part of it. And I think being part of, and that's what that conversation comes into. We've given a lot of things, but really what I wanted to talk to you is all of that you're doing now. You're going into workplaces and you work on the employees and that employee experience and that's what you talked about right from the beginning. If you're not feeling right in yourself, you're never going to be serving anybody.
Exactly that. And this is the thing. I think that some employers can get very frustrated by their employee. But if they don't recognise what is going on inside for that person, you know, that person maybe doesn't love themselves, maybe doesn't have any self-worth. And that needs to be cultivated, that confidence. That feeling inside needs to be worked on so that they can then serve others. If they can't serve themselves, then they can't come from that place because they're empty. You know, the whole kind of pouring from an empty glass kind of thing. You know, it's so important. I think that leaders, managers, people need to understand that, you know, cortisol is catching.
Yes.
You can feel it.
Absolutely.
That's why when you spend time with people and they are lighter and brighter, you think, oh, I want to spend more time with those people because that feels really good.
Yeah,
you're feeling the energy. You're feeling their chemistry. But when somebody is in that really low vibrational state, you know, it can be very difficult. Sometimes people say it's like an energy drain kind of thing.
Yeah, mood suckers.
Or
Aren't
vampires,
they?
you know, it's that, isn't it? And I think it's really important that we start to recognise how important it is to get that chemistry right and to know that there are things that we can do to help to shift that balance, that chemical balance in our favour. And to recognise that also we mirror people around us too. So if you've got somebody serving you and they're very closed down kind of thing, you are probably going to feel like you can't really trust them. You're not going to feel very open and like you want to be collaborating and cooperating.
Well,
you're going to close down
because
too.
You're mirroring.
Exactly that. So I think it's really important that we recognise if you're going to have somebody who's meant to be an ambassador for your company at the end of the day, we need to be looking at if they're stressed, because that's going to affect their tone.
Yes.
It's going to affect whether they've got any patience. I'm sure we've all been on the other side of somebody who has been very impatient and has made us feel like we're an inconvenience when we're spending money or trying to spend money with somebody. And you're like, hang on a minute, what's going on here? And, you know, their creativity, the way that they serve you, is going to suffer in that respect. And I think that it's so important that our team members feel valued, that they feel supported. And I think that offering some of these tools and techniques so that they can start to regulate their own nervous system, and it does take practice. It's not a wave a magic wand and one time you do it and then, you know, you never feel that way again. You do have to practice it. You will start to notice those people start to turn up in a different way. They'll start to be warmer. They'll start to be more open.
Yeah.
They'll start to have that detail in their focus and how they show up and their care. And they can start to actually feel more comfortable in their own skin.
Absolutely.
Which is going to make them more authentic. And then that is going to be felt by the end user, rather than them being in autopilot, doing the same thing, turning up. It's like being a robot. And they're not really bringing any of their essence in themselves, you know? And I think it's also important to recognise that it's not just what's going on in work that sometimes can be stressful. We all have personal lives.
Right, absolutely.
That are affecting us too. And so it's important that we recognise that people are dealing with a lot, especially in the world that we're in right now. And so we need to be offering them simple, micro tools, things that can help them to shift from a state of chaos to calm, and that they can use at work, at home. And, you know, when I say simple, I mean breathing. The amount of people that I work with, and these are incredibly intelligent people in very high up positions of authority, who do not know how to breathe. So they're breathing shallowly rather than deeply. And we can explore that together as well, and what that feels like. And that makes such a huge difference to how we feel inside, mentally, physically, emotionally.
I think also, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And, you know, being able to explore different tools, and different things don't suit everybody as well. And I think, again, so from an employee, me as a person, what works for me and how do I connect with that particular thing? So just an example, when I started with Feng Shui, which is my big passion from the outer energy thing, I started reading some things and I just didn't get it. And then I fell in love with that book, and that was it. That perception and that understanding of what was, that really connected with me. And I think that's the tools, and the different tools that you work with people will connect with one and not the other. And that's why that holistic approach that you provide is amazing for people.
So important. And this is the thing, when I'm going through a range of tools, at the start, I'm saying that. Some of these will resonate with you. Some won't.
No.
You know, if somebody can't visualize, a visualization is not going to be particularly helpful for them.
No.
I'm actually one of the small percentage of people who can't visualize.
Oh, really?
So I get that.
Oh, my gosh, right.
I've now started to be able to receive things as words and as in different ways, but that's because I'm very connected to my body. So I'm able to be open to that. But for somebody who's never done anything like this, and then doing something like a visualization, and they are one of those people who actually cannot visualize, you know, that would be very frustrating if that's the only tool that's offered to them. But if they're offered loads of different tools that they can try, and then they go, I loved the breath work. I really felt the shift straight away when I did that. I'm going to start doing that throughout my day. I loved the shaking. That felt amazing. Another person goes, that did not work for me. That was not my thing, you know? So it's like, it's giving people loads of different options, making sure that people feel like they're in a safe, supportive space so that they can let go and they can explore and they can be curious is really, really important. Because, you know, if it's just about pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, well, push yourself outside of your comfort zone a little bit, because you might find something that is really, really life-changing you know.
And it has a ripple effect. So again, you work with lots of organizations and the employees themselves and do workshops and training and things like that. From an employee's perspective, more often than not, very often, I'll just remove some of the words. But you feel a little bit, you feel a little bit of shame to say you've got a problem, or you're not sure whether there is a safe space in an organization to be able to say, I'm not feeling right. Can I have some support? And that's probably something that you come across often.
Yes. And I think that the more that we share these tools with the leaders, and I often work with the leaders first, so that they are embodied and they're actually integrating these things into their day at home, at work, and then start using it with the employees. Because otherwise, if it's not coming from the top, often they'll think, well, but if I do that, then they'll be like, what are you doing? You know, so there has to be that buy-in, I think. That's really, really important. And creating that safe space. What tends to happen if the leaders are in the room with the employees when they're doing the stuff too, if the leaders are vulnerable and actually say, this is something that for a long time I experienced, or this is something I still experience now, that also gives a lot of permission. And I think because I share my story with such vulnerability and I'm very open and honest about how I felt in the past, I literally have my inner critic and my cheerleader on the screen for them to see. Negative Nancy, positive Pamela. And they see all of the things that I've thought over the time and how I've had to cultivate this positive mindset. And not just through the mindset, but through how I move my body and show up and my breath and everything. It really lets them go, she feels that way. She felt that way. No way.
We have something in common that you don't believe that you could have had.
Exactly.
And that makes you very connected on that emotional level, right?
Even the fear of public speaking.
Right.
Well, I'm stood there in front of them, public speaking in that moment, and they're like, hang on a minute, I can do the things that at one time have completely paralyzed me and said, no, I can't do that kind of thing. That is something that actually, if I put my mind and my body to it, I can do it. And, I think that when you then get the opportunity to work with people one-to-one, as well as in a group setting.
Yeah.
So the individuals who really do want to go that bit deeper, or who have really showed, actually, this is the critic that's running the show, and I actually can't even think about talking about the cheerleader.
Yeah.
Like, that's something I can't even do right now. For those people, offering them that deeper connection, doing the EFT work with them is so, so powerful. I actually have a little testimonial that I thought might be useful so that your listeners can get an idea of what it feels like to go on that kind of journey. So a client of mine said, EFT has helped me release old emotional baggage that I didn't even realise that I was carrying so heavily. Patterns of self-doubt and that deep-rooted feeling of not being good enough and enough are finally starting to shift. It's as if the emotional fog that clouded my past has lifted, and I can actually see it with compassion and not judgment. So this particular client went on a journey that myself and Hannah from Boscq do. So she does a lot of the presenting side of things, the messaging side of things. And I help people at the start to shift those things that are holding them back. So they said Joe and Hannah had such a powerful nurturing space. Like you say, that nurturing space is so important that I felt completely safe to go deep and exposed in. With each session, I peeled back layers that I didn't even know that I had left, and I left it for so long, and I've come away feeling lighter, freer, and more in control of how I show up with my family, my friends, my colleagues, and actually in the world.
I know. How beautiful is that?
Right?
Right?
And I think this is the thing.
This is what it's all about,
I could tell you what it does, but I just want you to for someone to say that they're going into meetings with more energy, with more confidence, with more calm, that they've shifted the stuff that's held them back for so long, and that weight that has been keeping them held down from moving forwards. I think that really shows.
That's big powers, right?
Yeah.
Big powers.
And that's why I love what I do so much.
Yeah.
Because to be someone who's witnessing that and just helping to guide somebody on that journey, it is such an honour. It really, really, really is. And businesses are starting to invest in this kind of work.
Right, and we need more, right? We need no more. So how, if somebody wants to connect with you and do some work and bring you in, and you can share your stories and your passion and all those tools, how do they connect with you?
They can get in touch with me. They can get in touch through LinkedIn.
Yes.
So Joe Ferbrache, send me a message there. They can connect on Instagram at Real Self Discovery, or they can go on my website, realselfdiscovery.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Joe. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And we just, we have such an energy as well. And we truly believe that, your own inner energy and your own self, you're never going to show up if you don't feel right in yourself. So, come and connect with Joe. I'll put the links as well in the notes as well, so you can connect and just, take care of yourself, right? Keep shining. You can't shine on the world if you don't shine in yourself.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and speak again soon.
Definitely.
Bye for now.
Bye.
For more on creating exceptional customer service for your business, head to claireboscq.com. Listen to more episodes of The Shine on CX Show, wherever you get your podcasts. The Shine on CX Show.